So typical stadium has somewhere between 40 to 60 cameras. All these cameras also send their feeds in real time back to our production centers. That place has 16 studios inside it. Each studio handles a different language of production.
So you are telling me that my favorite Hindi commentator is not sitting in the stadium?
It depends. Yeah, there is a director. He's actually like the director of a movie, an action thriller drama. Yeah. So what gets shown to you as the end user is actually that director making a choice at that point in time.
Wasim Akram, who is a page, who is going to take much more runway. That person is potentially helping generate more revenue to support the free viewership. On the other hand, Ravindra Jadeja is giving much smaller window.
Single IPL match that you watch on your device has 350 feeds which are being generated all the time.
So I have seen these WhatsApp group messages that Dhoni maar raha hai, and the moment that message starts going Dhoni maar raha hai, then everyone is just switching over and opening
the. Our concurrency grow by 5 million.
Yeah.
In the time it took Dhoni to just walk onto the pitch.
In the immediate future, in the next 2-3 years, I feel AI adoption to live streaming will be huge.
Hello everyone. Today we have two fantastic accomplished guests on the Scaler Pod. We have Nikhil, who has been building media and streaming products for almost 28-30 years now, starting with back in 1996, building it for Times, Femina Miss India live streaming.
It was 98.
Yeah. And then like those from the older generation would know about Zapak Games, which was one of the, I think, pan-India famous gaming platform. So Nikhil had been founder of that. And then since the internet revolution in 14-15 started, where almost everyone had 50% of Indian population today have access to internet. And of course, a large part of that is about media content consumption. So you have been kind of architect, orchestrator of building a lot of those things.
I've been a part of it. I don't think I've built so many of those things. There have been many, many contributors. I think the internet really started in 96 originally. That's when I think the first time BSNL launched these TCP IP connections.
Right.
So that was the beginning of the internet. I was very fortunate to kind of have an opportunity right at the very beginning in Times itself when we did the print going online, right? So timesofindia.com, economictimes.com. And that led to many other things from there. But yeah,
no, of course,
it's grown dramatically since 2014-15.
Right. No, I think just like almost all the people who have driven big impact, one very common thing that comes is extreme humility. So, it's great to see. We have Ashutosh. Ashutosh have been building high performance, high scale system for close to 10 years, for 7 years almost into
IPL.
Getting all of us to see fantastic IPL games. So Ashutosh is also part of JioCinema team. We have these two fantastic guests today. And what we are going to talk about today is, a journey of a video packet. All the way from an IPL stadium where, the Mahi is walking in, that frame is captured by a camera, and not just a camera, but probably there are 30, 40, 50 different cameras in the ground that we often do not even realize when watching the match. And then from that moment, it travels across thousands of miles, across multiple nodes, before it ends up on my mobile screen or your TV screen, right? So we will be taking a deep dive into this entire journey, that what all happens behind the scenes when we are cheering up for our favorite team or sad about, the loss that our favorite team is going through. So Nikhil, I'll start with you, that if you could tell us about, that very first stage, that, the Thala is hitting a shot, it's captured, we are all cheering, and, it's captured in the camera. Tell us what happens there.
Okay. So, just to put it into context, there is a dedicated, very highly skilled team of people who only do this as their primary job, right? Yeah. My role actually is fairly further downstream once all of that is done. But I'll try and tell you what they do, right? So that's important to know, that there's many, many people who help make that happen. So a typical stadium has somewhere between 40 to 60 cameras. And I would say there are probably 4 or 5 different types of cameras. The first one is your standard cameras, which are, with telephoto lenses, which are taking close-up shots, right? And they can pan as well as zoom, right? There are fixed view cameras which are pointed at a certain part of the field, right? So when the ball gets hit in a direction, then a particular camera has to pick it up, right? And that camera has to always be there, right? So one is following players. Some cameras are following only players, like a bowler focused camera, a batsman focused camera, something which is focused on the umpires. And then there are the ones which are covering different parts of the field, which cover fielders. And if the action moves there, then that shot gets picked up. So all of these cameras are continuously shooting. Right? This whole process starts as much as 4 hours before the game, right? Yeah, there's also 360 cameras which are on the spider cam, and there's the spider cam itself, which moves along those guide ropes, right? And that covers action from really close, from top of the field.
Generally, that is not noticeable to the viewer, but these are like
you
kind
can
of
see. Sometimes the camera gets hit by a ball as well. We've seen that happen too.
Multiple times.
But yeah, that's a very amazing technology. I've actually seen it getting set up. And it's a very, very difficult operation because they have to set up very specific kind of anchor points for those cables on which the camera rests, right? And then those cables move. So the camera moves along with it. So it's actually 4 cables, and then the camera is literally hung between those. So the camera can be pulled in different directions. So it can cover different parts of the field, right? So that's another type of camera. Then there are cameras which are from Hawkeye, which does your LBW decision, right? So the ball trajectory, that gets captured not just as video, but also as data, right? So there are applications of that as well that we have seen in the past, which are very interesting. Some of them
is
leading
for the
to
third umpire decision.
Third umpire decision is on ground as part of the play that is required, but we have seen other uses of it, which we can discuss when we go into interactive stuff later on. There's also cameras which are used to, support other types of decisions for the third umpire, right? So one which points at the bowler's crease, for example, which is used for the no ball verification. So all of these different cameras have specific purposes. There are these few cameras which actually have pan capability as well, and those cameras have really experienced cameramen who know the play, right? And they can follow what's going to happen, what's likely to happen next, where to go next. And the second part is that there is a director of production who's actually sitting and he's in constant communication with each of the cameramen. So they're on their own headsets and they can talk to each other. So imagine it like a game, right? You're playing a game and you team up together and play Counter-Strike. That's exactly what is happening.
It's very interesting that while there is a game happening on the ground,
there's another game.
There's another layer of game which is happening across the crew.
And it's all real time. You don't have anything more than a few milliseconds to react to something. The entire life cycle of a delivery, which is the bowler starts running up to deliver his ball, and the ball gets hits and reaches the fielder or the boundary or wherever, the entire period is less than 15 seconds. That's it. 15 seconds is all it takes for one delivery to be complete. The next delivery begins a little later, 15-20 seconds later. So the ball is retrieved, and after it is dead, then goes back to the bowler, and then the bowler starts his run up again. But that period is approximately just about 12 to 15 seconds, 17 seconds.
And this entire 15-second cycles are repeated almost 120 times at least.
Yes.
In a game.
And in each of those 15 seconds, there is all this orchestration which is happening. All these people are talking to each other, all these cameras are moving, all these feeds are coming out, and you just see the action, right? Saying, okay, I got to see the bowler doing the run-up, going and throwing the ball, then the batsman reacting to it, hitting it somewhere, the reaction of the wicket keeper to it, the reaction of the umpire to something that's happening, right? And then the close-in fielders and wherever the ball goes, and then everything that happens after it. Maybe a great moment happens, a catch happens, or a misfield happens, and all of that is captured, irrespective of where on that ground it's happening. Right? So that's all possible only because of all of this orchestration. The real process actually begins as much as 24 to 48 hours before that, when a stadium is rigged, right? So that rigging process is essentially setting up the camera positions, setting up all the fiber optic cabling between those cameras to a local production control room, media control room, where all these different camera feeds come in. And then there is one production, which is the official production, which is done by the BCCI. And that has, that's the English language broadcast that you see, both on streaming platforms as well as TV. And that production has all of its production team in each stadium. So that team travels between stadiums with each game, right? And they usually have 3 crews, because there are Sundays or Saturdays when you have double headers and 2 games are happening in 2 different cities. So that's your primary production.
So you talked about these cameras. There's a fixed camera, there's pan camera.
All these cameras also send their feeds in real time back to our production centers, which is one single big premises, which is called OUC. That's acronym for the building that we are in. But that place has 16 studios inside it. Each studio handles a different language of production, right? So all those camera feeds, while one is being produced on ground, which is the English feed, main feed, but all the language feeds that you see, Marathi, Malayalam, Telugu, Kannada, Haryanvi, Bhojpuri, all of them have their own dedicated commentators, dedicated graphics in those specific languages, and all of those come back to our central location in Mumbai. And this whole process is called remote production. So this is very high capacity, redundant links provided by multiple providers. And that's as much as between 4 Gbps to 10 Gbps of network throughput is required to pump all of this video and probably 100 different microphone inputs. So there are various crews. There are as many as I think about 8 to 10 companies which are involved. For example, Dolby will have a crew at the stadium to do Dolby sound production. Right? There'll be a separate crew and a company which does only the scorecard, which appears at the bottom of the screen. There is a Hawkeye itself which does all of this support ball trajectory information. So Quidditch, which does the buggy cam, which you see on the ground during the presentation ceremonies and at other points during the strategic timeouts. So all of these cameras are essential to the production. So the experience that we have grown to like today is all possible because there are literally a few hundred people doing this every single day.
A very interesting orchestration between just one
massive orchestration, and there are people who have learnt and done this for many hundreds of tournaments now. And
so you are telling me that my favorite Hindi commentator is not sitting in the stadium?
It depends. Yeah, see, I think that's a part of the need of the tournament, right? It's a massive tournament of massive scale. Imagine having to have everybody travel every single day. It's a very
the matches are
condensed tournament, right?
Yeah.
This season is the longest season in terms of number of days. But prior to this, most of the seasons have been roughly between 54 to 57 days. And you have 74 games happening. This is the 10-team format, right? Earlier it was a few lesser games, so around 60 games used to happen. Now it's 74, and I think it's going to expand a little more again in the 4th year or 5th year. So all of this has to be condensed in, because all of these players, particularly the international players, are playing for their own countries. India has its own commitments to other tournaments, bilateral tournaments, and ICC tournaments. So there's a very narrow window for the IPL, and that window is sacrosanct, right? And that happens to overlap in different years with different other things. Like this year, it's overlapping with elections around the country. So it's while we don't have to do it, but there are people in BCCI and our production teams which actually have to factor in all of these things, right? If you have an election in a particular state where that particular venue falls, then you cannot have IPL and the election day on the same day. So there's somebody thinking and planning that, which is why this year we got the first 2-3 week schedule earlier. And once the election schedule was available, then the remaining dates were announced. So it's a lot of logistics which need to be.
In fact, like studios are complex in nature, right? So you cannot move it from one stadium to another stadium. If there's a certain setting, certain equipment, certain capabilities needed. Not every stadium is the same size, right? Like Wankhede is different from a Mohali stadium and all of that.
That's a huge factor. I think there are also situations where, for example, because of the geometry of the stadium, camera placements will change, microphone placements will change, which means that the rigging for that, joining all that together and bringing it all together network-wise, all has to change, right? And then this is very expensive equipment. So you cannot have, if there are 12 stadiums, you cannot have 12 sets of equipment. So there are probably 3 or 4 sets of equipment and then people traveling with them. So they need consistency,
Right.
So that is paramount over here. So that consistency of setup, consistency of following protocols is very, very important.
Yeah, one interesting thing which we observe, right? Like where it is shot, the location actually changes the quality of video which you see. Let's say there is fog or there is
Smog,
smog,
yeah.
right? Like the natural feed which itself has been shot is blurred because that's how it has been captured, right? It plays around with your encoding. The graphics play around with your encoding and what we do in digital world. All of these have impact on our digital encoding as well.
So you talked about that these video streams which are being captured through the rig and maybe 30-40 different cameras, it gets sent to your one Unity center in Mumbai from the stadiums located across the whole country, sometimes even maybe in Dubai or somewhere outside. How does this link work? That
Yeah, so it's different for different locations. So while all the stadiums or most of the stadiums in India are wired up with dedicated connectivity with multiple paths for resiliency, when the tournament shifts outside the country, then that path changes somewhat. But yes, that's also been done. It's possible. It's just the amount of lead time that's available and the cost at which it happens. During the pandemic, for example, we had a truncated session and then it resumed in the Middle East. So that was a lot of logistics which had to come together to do it in the middle of the pandemic.
Right.
But yeah, those kind of things can be done and have been done many times before by IPL.
Right.
Some of the other tournaments as well. I think we're going to see a World Cup now in US and the Caribbean, right?
Right.
So that's going to be another new location altogether. So we don't know what the pitches are going to be like and what the weather is going to be like and when it's going to be played.
Yeah.
So new things happen all the time.
No, I think it just added another very interesting layer of complexity, that just the distance between the stadium and your production control room, right? Now that, like, from being in the same subcontinent, it becoming across almost diametrically opposite locations on the planet Earth, and the kind of complexities that might add. But if I come back to, let's say a match happening in Mohali, and from there the link, which is a dedicated link of high bandwidth fiber to your OUC in Mumbai, typically, like one, you talked about redundancy, right? That because of course it's a very high criticality link. If it goes down, everyone in India stops seeing the match.
Yep.
Right. And it also need to be extremely low latency. While there are like so many different feeds, you talked about maybe few hundred microphone feeds, and what is the typical bandwidth it uses, and how do you ensure that there is negligible possibility for it to go down?
The lowest I've seen is 3-4 years ago, it was 4 Gbps. I think this year it's at about 10 Gbps. That's a dedicated link between each stadium back to Mumbai. It's actually via multiple providers. Each provider has multiple routes. So even if there is a breakage or an interruption or a flap in the network somewhere on one of those routes, the other route can take it up. And this is all, it's called hitless, which means that you never see that interruption or that breakage anywhere. So there are specific protocols which handle this, very specific equipment which handles this, and all of that is set up for each location for every single game and tested thoroughly 24 hours before the game. Right? So it's all ready and functional throughout the game.
The cameras produce at about 30 or 40. Each camera produces a feed at about 40 or 50 Mbps, right? Like
yeah, most cameras will output at roughly about 40 to 50 Mbps, usually around 50 Mbps. And then there are the 4K cameras which do even higher. And the 360 cameras also can go a lot higher because they are roughly about 8 to 12K depending on the camera model that we're using. So that's all has to be carried back. So when you talk about all these cameras, also, it's like 50 feeds into average of, let's say, 50-60 Mbps. Right? So that's the throughput that's required.
Also taped as well. So
yeah, and the real beauty in this is that the latency that you spoke about, right? It's what I have seen is that it's less than probably 2 frames, which is like about 80 milliseconds.
Wow.
That's the latency on that link. That's because there is a direct link, fiber link.
It's a dedicated fiber link between the stadium and the production center. I imagine that in this entire processing might also add certain delay to it. So what are the complexities, challenges around it that the tech team has to solve for?
Yeah, so this is not part of what we do in the streaming part of it. This is all production domain. So there's a dedicated team which only does this, right? So I don't think I can comment on the complexities. There are many.
Of course, there might be much more.
We have seen them solve them over and over again. It's always great to see that. I would love to learn that myself at some point in time. I feel that every single year. That this year again, I've not had a chance to go and sit into that actually. Have some stake in that process. But there is a director, right, who's the director for that particular language feed, right? And that director or producer is really the person who has a feel for the game, who knows the teams, who knows the players. He has a plan in mind, right? He's actually like the director of a movie, right? Every IPL game is practically,
it's a movie,
an action thriller drama. Comedy thing,
and built in real time. Unlike
it's
a
all
movie
done
where
real
you
time.
have a chance
Exactly.
to post edit.
Shot produced.
So that director has that sense of moment, right? That occasion, and what needs to be done at that point in time. Who's playing how changes how he produces it in real time, right? So if a particular player is doing very well, he's got to react to that. He's got to have enough preparation to be able to carry that moment along and amplify it. So he actually looks at all of these different feeds that are coming through from the stadium, and there is a process that they follow, and there is physical hardware where they actually mix all of this, and this director actually needs to have a set of people who orchestrate a bit of for him, right? So while the commentators are also looking at some of these feeds and reacting to them, and there's real-time speech coming from them, graphics people have things ready, and then this producer or director is calling the shots, saying, I want this camera right now on the output feed. So what gets shown to you as the end user is actually that director making a choice at that point in time, saying this camera angle is the best angle, right? And he's talking to the cameraman, and he's getting exactly what he wants out of that, right? So if he wants the cameraman to zoom into a particular player or a part of the field or even a part of the audience, right? You see the cameramen have their own, and directors have their own sense of moment and saying that what's really happening, how's the sentiment to be expressed right now, and you show the crowd. That's a very important element of how we perceive participation, our own engagement with that game, right? During the pandemic, when there were no crowds in the stadiums, it was a serious challenge. How do you replicate that sense of environment? So that director is really, really, really important and the crux of this whole production in real time. But he's essentially looking at a wall of monitors, each one showing a different camera. He picks and says, okay, right now I'll pick this camera or that camera, and then lines it up, and that output goes out.
There's one more important role which the director has. Ensure that that feed is monetizable, right? When to show an ad and when to come back from it is all. He has certain objectives also for that.
Yeah, I think that this is really very unique to cricket as a sport, right? So most other sports have a very well-defined
format
segment of the game, right? Saying there's a first half and there's a second half, or there is a quarter, right? Or there's a set in tennis, right? Cricket doesn't have that. Cricket has innings and then overs within innings, right? And then you have to really make this available or accessible to everyone. And this is something that we have done, uniquely this last year and this year, that we wanted to give it to everyone, right? So an AVOD production, which means you don't need a subscription to be able to watch IPL on JioCinema. That meant that we needed to monetize it in another way, and that's advertising. So there's a natural break to cricket. So every time an over ends and the next over begins, there is approximately between 35 to 65, 75 seconds available.
Because a new bowler is coming in.
That's right. And that depends on the bowler, right? Who's the next bowler? Is it a pace bowler who's got a long run up, so you get a little more extra few seconds? If it is a spin bowler, somebody like Ravindra Jadeja,
Right.
you really don't get much time. But you've got to find that, and that's where what Ashu just said.
Every second matters. Every second is like
that
lakhs
director
of crores of
actually calls out on a feed. So this is a director's audio feed,
Right.
which you don't hear obviously as end users, but downstream the rest of the orchestration team, the playout team, they have that audio.
No,
on
so
their
I can
headsets.
relate with that as a viewer, often there would be an ad which abruptly gets cut sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is probably rooted in
That is the director's,
That's right. Because see, the director will ensure that none of the play is missed. Right. So whenever the bowler starts his run up, is the time when you have to come back. Right. So that's sacrosanct. We maintain that. So we have to find that opportunity within that. Right. So while we have made this decision to make it available to everyone, accessible to everyone at no cost, right? It means that we still have to be very judicious with how much advertising we put in, and only during those breaks which are well defined. This is not just over breaks. There is also when a wicket falls, right? So after you've shown the replay, during the replay you might see a band at the bottom, which is an ad, right? That's also an advertising position. So there are limits to how many such opportunities you can use, right? And then there is the strategic timeout, where also there is a break, which is about 2.5 minutes, right? So that 150 seconds is also available. So not entirely, but most of it. So these are the places where we add in and we wait for the DA's instruction. Which
So one very interesting layer that I observed that the Wasim Akram, who is who is going to take much more runway, that person is potentially helping generate more revenue to support the free viewership. On the other hand, Ravindra Jadeja is giving much smaller window for us to play. It's kind of a layer which is absolutely invisible to me as a user.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah, I think the important thing is that both are great bowlers, right?
Of course.
And I love to watch Bumrah and his action, or Pathirana right now and his action.
Right.
You don't want to miss any part of that.
Let's take a step further, that from the production control room, your feed is out. It's a feed that potentially is supposed to get distributed now. What is the immediate next step that happens?
So this goes into something called a contribution encoder. Right now, all of this is at very, very high quality. This is at 50 Mbps to somewhere around, like for the 4K and 360, it's at like 80, 100 Mbps. It's not practical for us to be able to deliver to end users.
While we would love to do that, but
We would love to, yeah, but
the
it's
user
not
devices and the network they are on, it just can't support that.
That's right. It's not possible at all. It's not practical at all, right? Maybe sometime 10, 20 years down the line, it will become possible to do that, and we'll all benefit. Contribution encoder does a step down. So it basically does the first encode of this very high bitrate raw stream, and it steps it down to a bitrate of somewhere around 20 to 30 Mbps.
Got it.
That also is very, very high. Right? But that's what is minimum required for other downstream processing to happen. Because this high bitrate stream, if you were to push it down into the downstream components, it would be too expensive in terms of computation time, and it would add delays or increase risk. Right. So all of these things are factored in, and that contribution encoder's job is to essentially step it down to a mezzanine level, right, which is common and it's standardized across all the languages, everything. So that one standardization step is called the contribution encoder.
So far, we talked about, the frame being captured at the stadium gets uplinked to your central production house in your One Unity Center. The entire production control room, orchestration, adding to that, commentary, graphics happened. And then it has passed through your contribution encoder to kind of convert that into a mezzanine level where it is standardized, which can be consumed further down.
That's right.
So far, how much delay would have gotten introduced? You had talked about 80 milliseconds to from stadium to OUC, and then
I think about another 40 to 80 milliseconds is all it takes.
So super efficient. Barely 1/10 of a second.
Yeah, it's a fraction of a second.
A fraction of a second. It's ready to be consumed by someone while it is not distributed yet.
Yeah.
But it's a stream which could be watched by someone in the.
Absolutely, we watch it.
Wow. So now we'll dig into that. The next steps that like you are probably watching that few seconds ahead of us, in a way superpower. What happens after contribution encoder?
So we have something called playout. So playout is essentially a workstation, very high powerful machine, where that feed that is coming out from the PCR and has now been conditioned by the
And there will be 12 different feeds.
Yes, one for each language.
for each
and it's not just the 12 languages, right? We also have other feeds coming out. So the total feeds this season for IPL is 20 feeds, right? That's because we have 4 multicam feeds from 4 different cameras, which are always available to you through the match. On the JioCinema player, you can actually select that multicam view and it'll give you options. You can look at it from the stump camera view, right? You can see it from a batsman's camera view, which are the camera is just pointed at the batsman. So all of those different views, bird's eye view and all that, you get all of those. You also have 360 cameras. There are 3 of them. So those are dedicated again 3 different feeds. So that's 12 plus 4, 16 plus 3, so 19. And then there is 2 more which are multicam, which depend upon the hero cam and multicam. So multicam shows 4 of the multicam cameras together in one screen. So it's like a grid, and all 4 angles you can see at the same time. And then there's the hero cam, which actually has a split screen view where you have the main feed and then you have a camera focused on a particular player. So for example, if you have CSK playing, then it'll be focused on Dhoni. So that camera always shows you what Dhoni is doing. Or when RCB is playing and you want to see what Virat Kohli is doing. So you'll see that. So that's the hero cam. So this is new this season. So all of these 20 feeds, 21 feeds are coming back. And now each of them goes to this playout. Whenever there is a break, this playout has an operator. This person actually is very focused on what's happening on the feed and listening to the DA, right? The director's audio. And whenever the director says go to a break and come back from a break, that's his opportunity. So he has ads lined up in that playout application, and he inserts those into the stream, right? And then comes back. So that queue out, queue in all happens there. So there are 2 types of ad insertions. One is where we actually insert a ad creative, which is a video file, which gets inserted. So it interrupts the broadcast and replaces some part of the broadcast where there is no action happening in between overs, and inserts an ad, right? There's another type where we actually just insert a marker saying this is the start and the end and there's this duration that's available in between. That's just a transparent signal. So there is a data track inside video which is carried. So like every video feed has a video track. There are multiple audio tracks, right? If you have stereo, you'll have 2 of those. If there's Dolby, there'll be more of them. If you have Atmos, you'll have even more of them. And then there's a data track. So this marker gets inserted into the data track. So it's invisible to users. But there is another workflow for ad insertion, which is for personalization of ads. And that takes over downstream, further downstream. But that's the playout stage. And then the playout output goes to the next stage of processing.
And so basically in playout, either when we talk about monetization, either some of the ads will be inserted, which in a way most likely will be distributed to everyone watching the match.
That's right.
And other optionality
on that particular language.
In that particular language, across one of those 1920 feeds, right?
Yeah.
And then there is another segment which could be queue out and queue in marker in the data feed, which could be used by a downstream process to insert a more personalized ad.
That's right.
In fact, the playout does more than just like ad markers. It has more capabilities which it inserts silently into the data, which is helped consumed downstream by our clients and by our system, by the player application, our applications to do more things inside it. There's a lot of interesting stuff we do over there as well.
So any other capabilities that you want to talk about?
That's all classified.
So now we have the playout ready. And then now we are probably getting one step closer to the end consumer. So immediately after that, then like it comes to the kind of, we are getting closer to the real distribution of the feed. What's the next step after your playout is ready?
So this feed is still at 20 to 30 Mbps, depending on the quality, HD or 4K. At this point in time, we actually start to kind of differentiate that stream into variations. Right? And there are variations by platform, there are variations by geography if required, Geography would mean that if I want to send an output to different countries and there's different advertising, different countries or different languages of commentary to be supported, we can do that, right? Mostly it's used essentially for platforms. So I am sending to a mobile phone. A mobile phone has a much smaller screen than a smart TV, right? So there are two different playouts, each dedicated to each of these platforms.
So there could be mobile, smart TV, web.
Webs and your some of the set-top boxes. Those are there. Right?
So
all of these different specialized feeds are all production outputs, and there's a dedicated distribution encoder which now starts to produce for each of these different output platforms for each language. So the 20 feeds that we had to start with, original feeds, those have now multiplied to something like 68 to 70.
Because of different quality.
Different platforms. Just platforms right now, right? So total, those 20 have become 68.
Become 68.
Yeah. Now from there, you actually start to do variants based on quality. The quality is more to do with the resolution, which is the size of the screen and the bitrate allocated to that. So if you're watching 4K on smart TV, we allocate much higher bandwidth to that. So that's produced at 10 plus Mbps. It goes up to as much as 15 Mbps. Whereas when you are sending it to mobile phones, which are on mobile networks where network throughputs are not that high, we actually send lower bit rates. The resolutions are fairly standardized, right? So you'll have the lowest one will be a 360p, then a 480p, 720p, 1080p, and then the 216.
There's something else, perceived quality versus what your QoS spec says, right? Like, just to add on to what Nikhil is saying, right? Like on a mobile, which is a 5-inch or a 6-inch screen, the 4K has a different perceivance versus a 4K on a TV or 55-inch.
Yeah, that's like the 10-foot distance to the TV versus the 10-inch distance to your device, right? So very different handling. Now each of these platforms get their own different multiple quality levels. Those are called variants, right? So this is where the resolutions come in because of the screen sizes and the resolution and the distance from the screen that the user is watching at. We define different bit rates for each of them, and this distribution encoder now downsteps that 20-30 Mbps stream that we had from mezzanine stage and play out now down to other layers. So the 4K would be at upwards of 10 Mbps, but then the next one, 1080p HD, would be at 3-5 Mbps, right? And then downwards from there, the 720 would be at like 2 Mbps or 1 Mbps, 1.5 Mbps, and so on and so forth. So each platform gets its own separate bitrate configuration, right? Because we have tuned it to how it is going to be delivered downstream. So from here, these output streams go into what is called the origin. Now that's the beginning of the CDN distribution tier. So that origin is where all these encoders are output, they're getting dumped into that. All of this is very minutely synchronized, right? So the whole point of doing streaming is to make large video, which would otherwise be a file of gigabytes in size, down to something which can be transmitted over networks, right? So you packetize it, break it up into small chunks, and those are called segments, right? So the segment duration is very, very critical. So that's a balance of, it's a trade-off between network throughput available from our end to the end consumer, and it goes through multiple types of networks. You might be on a fiber connection, you might be on a DSL cable kind of a DSL connection, or you might be on a a mobile network, 5G network, 4G network, 3G network. Each of them have different speeds that they can support. So we have to create variations which will fit into those network speeds, right? So all of these amount to a few hundred variations. So these 20 feeds that started the journey had become 68 by the time they came out for different platforms. These 68 have now become something like 350.
Wow. So this distribution encoder is basically taking these feeds and converting them into
splitting it further in different quality levels.
And then this is also where the protocol comes into play, right? Which is what the players will support downstream, right? But this has now become somewhere around 5 into 68.
Right.
So roughly about 350 odd
Right.
feeds are actually being produced
Right.
at the same time.
Right.
So a single IPL match that you watch on your device has 350 feeds which are being generated all the time.
So
throughout the match.
350 different channels are available to pick from.
Yes.
For a client.
Not to all devices.
Not to all devices.
So
A
for
device
each
picks just
user,
one.
Yeah, they pick one, but they have an optional set of maybe 5 to 6 available to them.
I think the stream is now available out for distribution to the CDN to be put on CDN, right? And as an average, techie, I might just say that your work is done. You have created a fantastic stream. You can just put it on a CDN, and CDN will do rest of the things. But I'm sure that there are many more layers to it than just putting it
I
on
wish
CDN.
it was that simple. I would have loved that if.
I would ask one question: that what % of your work is just about solving for CDN and distribution?
I would say that's in the last 2-3 years, that's probably all that I'm doing. The other part of it is fairly solved as a problem.
Yeah,
So it's now all of that attention is shifted, focus has shifted to just solving for distribution.
And I think this is a function of scale.
It's a
That
function
for
of scale.
for let's say if I'm running if I'm part of an e-commerce company where I might be using CDN and most of my needs are just fulfilled. I put it on CloudFront and I'm done. I just have to configure, define my source, define my CDN configuration, and I'm done. Right. But when we come to the IPL scale, what kind of interesting challenges then pop up?
See,
even for images, it is not that simple for us.
But
Very interesting.
let's say for images, in a typical user session, you might want to transfer maybe a few hundred images.
Yeah.
Right, a typical e-commerce session, lasting 10 odd minutes, 15 minutes, maybe few hundred images. Right. Here we are talking about 25 images per second.
Yeah.
That's video.
Right.
So again, going back to that,
Right.
What's video?
And plus
really?
maybe 3 million people
So, yeah.
doing that at the same time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So when you have to do this, there is a lot of complexity in CDN, right? So the CDN is not just a single blob of infrastructure. It's actually a multi-tiered infrastructure which is distributed very widely geographically and also into different networks because consumers use different networks. We have no guarantee that all users are going to use only 5G Jio network, right? There are people who use other network services as well. Some are on broadband connections provided by many different ISPs. So when I look at JioCinema traffic, I see something like 3,500 to 4,000 ISPs as the origins of traffic to our platform, right? Now for all of these, we cannot go and install infrastructure, servers at each of these locations, right? So CDNs play that role. CDNs have gone ahead and before demand builds up, they've gone and set up infrastructure in key points of presence where there's adequate density of users, demand for traffic, and then they go out and sell this capacity to publishers like us, right? Whether it's other e-commerce companies or us in OTT space, whatever different form of media, right? But even they have a finite reach because this is physical infrastructure that they have to build. It is the same logic that applies to network.
Cloud is not truly elastic or truly cloud, right? There's a finite, internet is finite.
When you get to that scale, you realize when you get to that scale that the cloud is not infinite.
Cloud is, it's also ephemeral. It's not permanent, right? It's never in the same shape, size, form. It shifts along with consumer demand and supply of infrastructure. So CDNs, we realized very early on that the kind of scale we are operating at for IPL, there's no single CDN which has all the capacity that we need. So we had to start thinking about federating capacity from multiple CDNs, right? So while we were at one end working on optimization of encoding and compression to reduce the footprint of the video that we are processing and generating, at the same time we had to think about how do we leverage multiple CDNs, right? And all of them have to pick up our content from our content distribution encoders, right? In origin. So we need one origin. That's the first layer that has to come together. That origin needs to have its own support for various different mechanisms related to how long will it store that content, what variants will it store, not store, what are the rules governing that storage, then what security to be applied to it. Hundreds of different things come into play into an origin. How much content is there? How many variants are there? Will each CDN handle just a part of your 600 streams that we are producing, right? That we spoke about. The 68 into.
So whether, let's say, if you have 5 different CDNs, you could put maybe a few 100, 150 on each.
That's right. That's one way of doing it. That's one way of doing it. And we experimented with that way, in fact, saying that, okay, I'll do my Hindi stream on one CDN, I'll do my English stream on another CDN. And we can, now how do you get users to connect to that particular CDN? Now that's where you are the user's player when he clicks on that tile on the JioCinema app to request the start of a video. That request is coming to our service. Now that service is where we determine where is this user coming from.
CDN I can route this guy to.
Which is the right CDN for this particular language stream from the right platform that the user is watching, and which is the best CDN to serve it
from. Maybe even which location the user is requesting this from.
Yes, that's part of the whole thing. Which network, network type, right? Network provider, network type, geographical location, network latency, right? And then various different other QoS parameters that we are tracking, right? Historical track, we maintain all those. So all of those factored in, we decide, okay, where to send this particular user. So that start of a stream
in the real-time performance of the CDN to that?
Not in real time, but we slightly lagging behind. We do have those indicators available to us.
So it depends, right? Like if something is very poorly performing, then we'll take action upon it. Like there are thresholds, right, between the band everyone is expected to perform. Also, it's a function of time of the day, day of the week, what parallel events are going, which teams are playing, what parallel events. So, like
that's one of the big factors.
Like you have let's say a fire sale going on an e-commerce platform. That is also a variable to this thing. So a lot of variables, you have to figure it out what that right thing is. But yes, we do react. It's not like that we will not react in real time. If something is going terribly wrong, then we'll react and immediately intervene and take corrective steps as well.
Yeah, but the short answer to your question, original question, was that it's not a handoff to CDNs, fire and forget it, right? We had to build all of this, understanding and then federation of all of these different CDNs, and each CDN product has its own, nuances of how you can configure it, use it, right, for the same identical use case. And you as a user might want to watch the match today, and you're watching from this location versus your home, and you might get different CDNs because different CDNs might have better affinity for you. Right? And all of this ability to understand this had to be built by us because no single CDN can build it and provide it. So we had to build it as a layer on top of all the CDNs. And we had to start using each of those CDNs over a period of months, right, to understand the dynamics of each one and then say, okay, this is how we will actually configure it. So then we have to build those tools to actually manage this and make it configurable. So today we have the ability to actually make these decisions in real time, right? And we could make it extremely autonomous as well. But that's not essential right now. But I think we'll get to that stage soon enough. I think by the next season.
Important parameter here would be because let's say when a match is at its peak, the amount of distribution resources that you are going to require might almost touch the total capacity of some of the CDNs.
Well,
so you have to
it frequently exceeds.
Right. So you have to kind of do this capacity planning beforehand.
I'll just throw in some numbers, right? Let's say last IPL we did about 32 million. What does that 32 million mean in terms of
3.2 CR users concurrently watching the live stream?
What does it mean in terms of like our planning and this thing, right? 3.2 million, 3.2 crore people, 32 million people watching means every minute the client generates about 30 requests, 15 for manifest, 15 for segments on an average. Probably more than that because they're doing ABR shifting and all of that. So you can assume generating about 35 to 40 requests. Okay. Now 32 million multiplied by 40 is the amount of request
billion, approximately
request per minute,
and
right?
And translate to QPS of kind of
it goes into like hundreds of millions
of QPS.
These are thousands of distributed nodes which
okay.
Need to understand this and cater to it.
And the interesting bit is like while CDNs, yes, CDNs might have overall high capacity and all of those things. to also look at in pockets they might not have capacity, right? They might have capacity overall present in India, but like Lucknow, for example, might not have a capacity available, or UP might not have a capacity available.
Right.
So to think about those variables also.
So this is a very significant point, right? When you have a CSK RCB game, right, the entire country watches. But when you have a Hyderabad versus Delhi game,
Right. So it's going to be just Delhi and Hyderabad, which is going to...
Not really, but
majority, a good chunk of that is
but
going
you'll
to
have
come.
more traffic from Delhi and Hyderabad, right, than normal days,
Right.
Except the really big RCB CSK, MI CSK kind of games. So the key thing here is, what is that demand pattern, which is the consumer demand pattern on a particular game.
So from the past matches, you would have certain...
We have trends.
Intelligence, yeah.
We have trends, but then you have what's happening in the game, and that might be different.
Yeah.
So, Dhoni coming into bat when the score is at 120 with 3 overs left, everybody comes out.
No, so I have seen these WhatsApp group messages that Dhoni maar raha hai, and the moment that message starts going Dhoni maar raha hai, then everyone is just switching over and opening
I have seen our concurrency grow by 5 million.
Yeah.
In the time it took Dhoni to just walk onto the pitch.
Yeah.
Just that time. It's probably around like 30-40 seconds.
Right.
That kind of flash traffic is what we see on a regular basis on all the big games.
And you have to kind of pre-plan for it. You have to make sure that the CDNs are available, there is capacity allocated.
Oh, yeah. So there's a whole protocol for that. We have, it starts almost 2 to 3 months. For this IPL, I started work on it November, around, I remember the 21st of November is when I sent out my first set of messages to all the CDNs to start planning. Saying, okay, start disclosing what you have, what is in build-out
How much capacity each can allocate.
What is available, what is in build-out phase, what do you need for us to help you get to those goals.
Like capacity building is not a simple exercise, right?
It's
if you think from a CDN perspective, just to elaborate on that, right? It involves you to getting physical servers, procuring that. Those servers are not made in India, so you have to import it. Then you have to go through all custom duties and all of that. You have to then find the location to deploy it. In the location, you should have power and network availability.
Rack cooling power.
Rack cooling power should be there. That means that you have to procure racks and networks and all of that. That has to be placed over there. Then someone should be able to go to that data center, figuring out access of that person to that data center for them. Just explaining the complexity for them to be able to access that data center, install the hardware, install the software, bring it online, and test it for a couple of days, and then do this. So this is not; these are all sound simple processes, but imagine doing it.
It's a lead time of months
to
do anything like this. And
so basically, almost 3 months before IPL start, you have to start
4
working
months,
on all of these. 4 months before that.
That is for this IPL. We are also at the time also thinking about next IPL.
Yeah,
it's not like
so now we are planning for 2 years ahead. So we already know what we are doing for next year.
So in a way, infrastructure development for the future demands.
So a lot of it that we don't have to do, but we have to work with
the partners.
We have to tell them. We have to anticipate our demands and tell them that, hey, this is where we anticipate more demands.
Right.
And while the states are geographically distributed in a certain way, the network and internet is not. Internet is not proportional to the geographical distribution of the country, right? You have key locations in India, which is Mumbai, Chennai, and Delhi. Delhi has started to grow up recently, right? Because Chennai and Mumbai is where your internet links terminate, largely. Like the sea cables and everything terminate over here. And that's how then the network penetrates, right? So surrounding regions of Delhi and Chennai would have higher capacity. And as you go more north,
the more inland you go,
the network, like, because fiber cables you have to lay is very complicated, right? So the network map is not same as what your population map is.
Right.
So you have to figure out all of those.
In fact, while we talk to the CDNs, we also have to talk to the networks.
Right. No, and I think it's a very interesting insight that a particular region, which is like, let's say, if the speed of growth in a particular sub-region is much faster than others, it's a very strong signal for the kind of new internet businesses that could be built out. Many people would not know that in this particular region there is so much faster growth.
No, I think, see, for example, I know CDN deployments compared to last year. This year, in the past 1 year, there are at least 40 new physical locations, which are 40 new towns, which now have CDN POPs. Right?
I remember
across multiple CDN providers, but there are 40 to 50 new locations which never had CDN pops, which means that their users had a little bit more latency because they had to go to the next nearest city.
More congestion and
More
all of that.
congestion, all of those factors.
Correct.
But today, this year, they have a better experience. And this is growing. I know for a fact that every day what new capacity is coming online. Right? So every 3-4 days, we have a new pop, getting ready to serve traffic.
And this is just, it has just changed so much in last 10 years. 10 years back, if I look back, the number of CDN pops were just only limited to, I think, few metro cities.
3 or 4.
Yeah, 3 or 4.
Yeah, I mean, there were like some 7 or 8 major pop locations in India.
Correct. And today you are saying it has already gone to maybe 40, 50. Or
It's gone to hundreds.
Hundreds.
So there was always some small presence. There was one provider which was more distributed than the others. The others were more concentrated. But now I think there are 3 providers which are going distributed in a big way. So it's in hundreds of locations now.
Right.
That just tells that the digital penetration and demand.
I would say it's close to like probably 500 locations as of now, right? Across all. So some of the locations have multiple providers in that region, geographical region.
And for the audience, if you could just talk about what exactly is POP, what does it do?
POP is a point of presence. So you basically say, okay, if I have Mumbai as a POP, then all Mumbai users who are connecting from any of the networks in Mumbai will be delivered their stream from that Mumbai.
So this is my nearest server.
This is the nearest
CDN
server.
from which I can connect and download. the
Like if I were to very simplify it, let's say you were to buy milk, and earlier you were going from village to let's say a city.
Nearest city to go
nearest city. Now you can go to the nearest district hub and get that milk from there. So you and because and that's what it saves, right? So your travel time distance reduces.
And eventually there is a, let's say, small distributor in my village itself.
Yes.
Where I can just go and buy the milk.
So more points of presence means that more content consumption is happening.
And it would be much faster.
Yes.
For them.
And cheaper also.
And cheaper as well. Right.
Cheaper not just for the user, cheaper for the entire
For the provider. And I think net any saving to the provider eventually will translate to saving for the consumer as well.
See, we are already one of the most economical data and network markets in the world.
Correct, absolutely.
But that is possible only when you do these kind of interventions. So that's, I think, really great to see that it's happening more and more.
And no, I think this digital infrastructure, what I see is that the impact of platforms like JioCinema, etc., is way beyond just entertainment. Because the digital infrastructure that is being created, there will be and that might be being created only for entertainment and sports, but that would be used for so many other things.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think this overall improves everybody's experience across all different categories. Right? While it was built and maybe sustained with what commitments we made to these providers, but eventually it will benefit everybody else.
Now the section on the future, that future of streaming, like maybe, and I think it's important to also segregate future into 2-3 different buckets. Maybe a short horizon of maybe 3-4 years, and then a long horizon of maybe 10, 20, 30 years. Because often we overestimate what could happen in very short time and very hugely underestimate what can happen on a longer horizon. So I think in the future as well, all the different segments that we look at, production, processing, distribution, monetization, and I think AI has been the talk of the town, that and of course it's super powerful, particularly in last 1.5 years, the kind of leaps that have been taken. So let's talk on these one by one. Maybe we can start with the production to begin with. Like today we have some kind of cameras which are pretty advanced already, but what could be the future of production for the sporting events?
Yeah, there's lots which is constantly happening, right? And I think we because we started last year, this is a new rights period for us. We actually made a lot of forward investments. So last year we made multicam default, we made 360 default. Every stadium we rigged it up and invested into building that infrastructure for it and buying the equipment for it, training the people for it, setting up the links for it. So it's a huge investment and huge effort to do all that, but it's done, right? So we are probably a little beyond what is the norm, right, already. So that is because we started only last year. If we were 3 years, 4 years into this journey, we might have had some things. We might have been considering some things. So all those things, it's helped that we have started recently. Second, going 3-4 years forward, I think the one key change that's going to happen, and most of these changes are going to be driven by the need for improving that user's experience and getting the user to spend more time with the stream, engage more. So one of the things that we think is going to happen is that today on mobile, for example, you can, in our app, you can do things like that, emoji stream, chat with others. All of those things are not possible on smart TVs because you don't have a keyboard there. You don't have any other interface over there. So one of the things that we've done this season, we've just launched, and this is going into that hybrid or second screen experience territory, where if you see the current IPL on JioCinema, you will see a QR code come up, and you have to click for that, where you say hype mode, right, when we launch. That hype mode essentially shows you a QR code. You scan it with your phone camera.
And now I can interact with
standard
the phone.
scanner. And now your phone has turned into like the second screen companion to your TV. So you're watching the game on TV, that whole interaction with emojis, the chat stream, the game associated with that, all that is happening on your phone screen. Right? Everybody sits in front of the TV with their phones. They don't leave them in another room. Right? So this is a very natural expansion of the dual screen kind of a behavior, which lets people interact with it continuously. So they might not be watching the same screen for the entire 4 hours, but they'll be connected with the entire game as a whole across 2 or 3 different experiences throughout the game. Right. So this is hybrid kind of delivery of that whole experience. So this is something which I think is the next the next nearest term, like medium term, 3-4 years.
1-2 years.
This we've already done this year. So I think we'll keep building up upon this.
This is live already?
This is already live. You can see this right now on the this year's IPL on smart TV platforms. You'll start seeing it now on other content besides IPL. Because like I said, once we build it for one, it's available to all other content. Besides this, I think multicam is another area which a lot of other global sports are kind of experimenting with. You see that as a standard on our platform right now. This whole split screen hero cam is another one. I think another near future thing, 3-4 years, 5 years is, which is a efficiency kind of a related improvement, could be, and it takes time to get some of these changes through, but separating graphics from video, right? So your graphics can be interactive. The graphics I want to watch and the statistics and graphics might be different from what you are interested in. Right? I might be more interested in all the bowler statistics and get more detail of them. Right? But you might be interested in more batting statistics or the team statistics. So can you make statistics interactive? So the statistics can move away from being a band at the bottom, which is static, right? You cannot interact with it, to your client side. Right. So that's something which I think is going to be the next.
So then it becomes, instead of being a part of the video stream, it becomes rather a data stream.
That's
And then it's an application overlaid which I can play with.
Right. And it is also great for video. Because now your video doesn't have to handle 2 different types of media within the frame. You're not worrying about showing the right picture,
complexity on the client side,
and the right kind of the text rendition, right? So the text render, you have to be a lot more careful because text, people will make out any imperfections over there very quickly. So that becomes easier. So this is one potential direction it could go in, right? But there are some creative kind of approvals required over here. There is somebody who maintains a certain format. So, but yeah, this is native to the digital experience. So, which is why I'm kind of calling it out as an opportunity for JioCinema. It doesn't make sense for every platform. It makes sense for a digital platform.
In the immediate future, in the next couple of 2-3 years, I feel AI adoption to live streaming will be huge, right? Like you'll start seeing more vernacular languages coming out. Like today, the biggest challenge is that
I just have 12 today, but maybe it could be 60.
Absolutely.
So those, like I could just use mix of commentary from whatever source production different languages I have, so that I can generate a new tonality, right? See,
there could be another very interesting thing that I think the way in the game streamers, there's a very common genre where someone is just playing game and someone is doing the commentary. So a lot of, I think, influencers could just offer their commentary. That you could pick the commentary of your favorite.
It's been possible for a long time. It's just that we can't do it because there is a requirement to ensure a certain level of quality of content.
It's not.
Right?
It's still a marquee content. No, it's not.
So the freedom that a game influencer has to run a stream on a platform where they can use an OBS or something on their laptop and have one camera pointing at them and have the game and then you overlaid over the inset and you show that. That's the experience you're talking about. It's really easy to do, right? It's just that we are subject, because of the scale of viewership, we are subject to maintain a certain quality level. And what is good for small groups to experience with a certain kind of language and tonality to it might not be suitable or possible for
the cases might not be that exact extreme of the gaming one, but what happens is that, say, you have a favorite radio jockey. Okay, now that radio jockey cannot do commentary, but the AI can assist him, or you might just capture his voice and take his consent, and maybe you will generate commentary in his style, right? It's dubbing versus tonality, right? Like one of the key difference is like in the commentary is the style of commentary, right? That is super important for someone to adopt and be able to produce it. So those things will happen a lot more.
Yeah, these are definitely like 3 years, 5 years.
Those are definitely very on the horizon.
And then AI-driven stats is something which I feel will be which will start to coming out in the video. Today, whatever your scorecard and all of that is seen as like standard graphics and all of that. Like they're not insights. It's left to you to subject to
That's the commentator's job right now. The commentator has the experience, the context of having played, and they bring that part to it. But what if you can't hear them? What if you have to watch them? Right?
Actually, accessibility is another domain where you will make sports more accessible for people with different.
I mean, I would love to have a ASL commentary, right? A sign language based
commentary,
right? Can we generate that? Right. So this is where AI can be used very effectively. That can we create for all these languages, translate it to ASL, sign language, and have animated, signals which.
Moving a little.
This is very important. We should do it.
Moving a little further in future, I feel like the way you experience cricket will start changing. I think Nikhil was earlier, you were mentioning that the walls painted.
What would be the most immersive form of watching the sport while not being in the stadium?
Yeah. No, I think recreating that whole stadium ambience and everybody that, you also feel, I also feel that, I want to go to a stadium once. I don't want to go every day for every game. But for that one time, I want to go every season. Right? It doesn't have to be more than that.
Right.
But why do you feel that? Because there's a different kind of an energy in that, that whole ambience, that whole crowd, right? And that experience is a must-have experience. Now, can we somehow reach that same level of an experience in your home? Right? What does that take? So I think there's a natural, organic kind of progression of, video screens and that technology which is happening. There's audio technology which is changing. So if today you have Dolby Atmos, which we actually stream in, right? But probably not more than a few hundred people actually have an environment where they can experience it really well, right? So we have labs in our offices where we have tested this out and we produce it. Right, very few people are able to access it because that equipment doesn't exist.
People have, by the way, these days a lot of latest phones have Dolby Atmos. People actually ask for it. I believe the more accessible these technologies become to consumers on their hardware, the demand for these things will automatically pick up.
But I think we are not far from maybe a decade away at most, where you would be able to call your neighborhood or your favorite paint company and tell them to paint a new screen on a wall, and they'll come and they will plug it in and they'll just paint a new kind of a film or a coating, and that becomes your screen. So moving from these 40 inches, 42 inches, 50 inches, 55 inches, 65 inches, 80 inches it's all going to become irrelevant.
I think on Vision Pro,
you'll
in
be able
one
to
way
say
that is there
Vision Pro
already.
is still has its own journey.
It's a bulkiness. No? The idea is that
No, but
you
if-
should
if
be
I-
comfortable.
yeah,
It's a different journey.
I'm going on the horizon of 10 to 20 years then. That assume, let's say, if we make a hypothesis that such a Vision Pro is just like a normal glass that I wear and which transforms me into that world.
See, it might not.
Yeah.
Too early to say. I mean, I've seen from the earliest, headsets to now, and that's been a 10-year journey.
Yeah.
I remember experiencing the first headset probably in 2013 or something.
2013, 14, yeah.
Yeah,
When
so it's
very
been
early
10
version
years.
of Oculus, etc.
So we still haven't reached that inflection point, either in terms of the tech itself or to say that we can now bring the prices down to the point where it's
becomes a
accessible to
commodity.
everyone. So I think it's more practical for something like screens to grow and move away from the current LED, OLED, micro LED to a whole different material, because there's going to be, while we might not recognize it as such, but I think AI will have more impact on material science far quicker in coming up with new solutions for screens, and they will become available to end users far faster than headsets will.
Well, I think for common adoption, the cost also always becomes a very important factor.
But imagine if your room, all four walls and the ceiling could
ceiling is all
all be a
screens.
screen,
Yeah.
then wouldn't that also be an immersive experience? It's like going into a planetarium, right? So that's what you would feel like.
Yeah.
And then if you have sound, which also is now moving into completely wireless speaker environments, and if all of those get embedded into the same walls, invisible practically.
Then the noise of the stadium, that it's
Everything.
just coming from all around
All
you,
of
not
that,
just
right?
not just from the screen.
Then your air conditioner in your room might get smarter, and it might be able to give you the
The sweat and
sweat and tears and everything. So that's where I think 10 years from now we'll have a home theater which will be like this, right? And then we already have the camera technology or the processing technology to be able to generate the views that you'll watch on these kind of screens. But the really interesting bit would be not just this, but to say, can I control what the camera is seeing?
yeah.
Right? So today we talk
that will
about
also
the
happen, no?
40, 50,
I
60
feel like
cameras. Imagine it's feasible today. I can build it right now, which is to say that I can orchestrate a fleet of drones, right? Which all have 4K
you don't
cameras.
need to do that. You have to very simply. Today the problem is that the cameras are capturing 2D images. Okay, I recall somewhere, I think in China or somewhere they do this, right? There's so many cameras already present that you can create a 3D without drones. You create a 3D model of the entire stadium.
Yeah.
Which means you like if you use a 3D software or something where you can like take camera and place it anywhere in this, you will be able to do that. You don't need drones for doing
No,
that.
that changes your entire pipeline. That is no longer using the same pipeline.
Yeah.
Right? So the always tech development happens in incremental changes, and never that you replace the whole pipeline. Right? A 3D model like that, which is an outside-in model, right? And that's very difficult to do. It's very expensive to produce. And at stadium scale,
10 years future.
No, it's been done. It has been done about 5 years ago for an NFL game, right? So I've already seen the output of that. But it is usable only for select highlights, where you can move the entire stadium around like this and watch that action from every angle possible.
Angle you
Because there were so many cameras which were recording and creating a 3D model of it. at the
That's
same
what I'm
time.
saying. The AI would fill the gap, right?
No, so for this, again, you'll still need the camera lens, right, to capture it. Even that solution requires that lens. So I'm saying if you have, instead of fixed cameras, you can still construct the same 3D model out of a fleet of drones which can be autonomous in nature. They will be powered by some form of machine learning which is trained to find the ball, which is trained to find a fielder reacting to something, which is trained to look at the trajectory of the ball after it has been hit by the bat. And all of this is easily doable. Today, Hawkeye already does this for ball trajectory, right? Combining it with the bat, we already did, right, for the game that we had built once. So there are many different possibilities like this which will all need to come together. But eventually the outcome of this will be that 10 years down the line, you will have literally hundreds of thousands of virtual cameras in every stadium. So there'll be no inch of the stadium which is not visible to somebody who wants to watch it. So the idea is that will you be able to select what part of that action do you want to watch?
I think the next level is also that, there was this Disney's small floor on which you can walk.
Yeah.
And then if you are immersed in this, you can get a feeling that you are in the ground, you are walking around the players, and then you can just move around.
Yeah, that's possible
from whichever angle you want
now. But yeah, going forward, I think that's the production change. Today, you already have cameras in 360 which are doing reaching the 12K mark right now. Right, so this will become more economical. Today, these cameras are super expensive. They have very short active spans of shoot because, again, battery overheating, processing of so many lenses and so much resolution is difficult to do. So the workflow is not yet ready for them. But different parts of the value chain have different states of, readiness for next generation things. But this will all come together. But I think eventually it's the consumer experience which will drive what gets adoption. Right? While individual parts of it might be changing, but the entire chain to change will be driven by consumer experience.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for spending a long conversation detailing out. It was very, very insightful for me, and I'm sure our audience will find it equally exciting. There are many topics that we could have taken a deeper dive into, but of course for some other day. Thank you so much for coming over, and looking forward to host you again.
Thank you for having us here. It was really great to kind of recap all of these things. We don't get this kind of an opportunity often enough to kind of revisit everything that has gone into making this possible. It just kind of sets us up for more thoughts and making it better.
Yeah, the idea is like we want more people to be aware behind the complexities and understand and learn from this, and come up with just couple of us, just couple of companies are solving problems at scale. We like to see more people solve through. If this helps, then that will be
absolutely. And I am envious of all the engineers in the JioCinema team who are getting a chance to kind of do that PhD, right? That solving the problem that world has never seen before. I strongly believe, I think there should be a version of PhD which is driven by the industry, right? Where,
that's called experience.
Of
No, I think the good thing is that it's not a very tough space. It's something, it is multidisciplinary and multi-domain. So you need to have cross-domain kind of understanding. Foundations have to be built for that. But beyond that, there is nothing which is impossible or inaccessible, right? All of this is possible. It's just that it's not done by enough people for it to be reflected in terms of a lot of written down literature and patterns which you can leverage out of the box. But it's definitely something which is very easy to work with and experiment with. So not a constraint at all to anybody who has that motivation to go out and.
I think fundamental problem solving, that you think about all the variables, you figure out what is the best solution. Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you.